Assalamu alaikum friends, welcome to question number 19 of the SBR revision kit. And if you see question number 19 is from your ethical question, okay, which is question number 2 in your section A for 20 marks. This question is very important because 2 of your professional marks out of the 4 professional marks is in this question, which is your question number 2 for your ethical questions, okay, in your ethics. So we have covered all the questions under section A, the group accounting questions. Now we are moving to ethics question. Ethics question also, I have done most of it. I covered under the old revision kit, that is till June 2021. In the latest revision kit, I think only 3 to 4 questions are added. Your latest past paper. So those only I will be doing because others I have covered. Okay. So starting with that, as you know that Calibra is your September-December 2020 paper. Okay. Now, before reading, always read the requirements first. Okay. But you can just skim through the subheadings to get an understanding. We have apartment blocks, we have chief accountant and the company. Distributed ledger technology. This shows that this is something new. Okay. Now the requirement. Discuss how the company should have accounted for the sale of apartment blocks in accordance with IFRS 15 and IS 23. So two standard has been asked for 5 marks and this 5 marks is allocated among the two, IFRS 15 and IS 23. Now, this question most of the students were shocked to see IS 23 there. Reason? Because it does not come very frequently. That's the reason I always tell you, please study the whole syllabus. Just because a standard was never asked in the past year does not mean that they will not ask from you. Okay? So be prepared. Coming to part B. It's for 3 marks where you have to provide accounting entries that will be required to record the contractual sale of an apartment block. So this is also relating to the apartment block only. When you are selling this apartment block, how do you account for it? On 1st of Jan 2008 at the discounted amount over the 2-year construction period and is for 3 marks, very small amount of marks. Now, why it's very important to read all the requirements and then answer rather than just reading first requirement then answer, second requirement then answer. Reason is sometimes they might ask you in the second part, the later part they might ask you something which is related to your first part. For example, this one, A and B, they are related, but the requirements are different. So sometimes what most of the students did was the journal entries they recorded, they wrote in part A, and again they did it in part B because it was asked in part B. So don't do this, okay? They will never ask you requirements where you have to repeat information from part A and B. Yes, you can use the information from part A to part B, but it's never the duplication of things, okay? And it's for 3 marks. Now our main question is in part C, which is 10 marks and 2 of your professional marks. That means 12 marks. Double of the marks that was asked in part A and B together. That's why it's very important to pay attention to this. Discuss the way in which the chief accountant should have acted to ensure that maintain ethical standards in dealing with the issues described. Now, when you're writing ethical questions, you have to be very specific. Meaning ethical question, because they asked the ethical issue does not mean that you don't have to touch on apartment block or the other issues. No, you have to make sure that you use it in your ethics. Why? Because ethical question is spread out throughout your whole case study. You need the whole case study to answer ethics question. That's why they're giving you the professional marks also. The way you presented is very important. You have to identify accounting issues, the ethical issues, the code of ethics that has been breached. Okay, then the safeguard that you are telling the chief accountant to do. Okay, so now starting with requirement number A. So for that we need to only read the apartment block part, okay, to answer part A, that is for 5 marks. So the rest all is not needed. I only need to read the apartment block from here to here. This paragraph is enough for my requirement A and B. For requirement C, I have to read the others. Now, before that, always read these 3 lines, the introduction, the background which they give. Always read it before you read the other parts. So the company operates in the property sector and has invested in new technology, distributed ledger blockchain, because whatever they give you later on is from here only. In the background, they will just give you. So from background, you know what are the things they have included. For example, from here I know they have they have invested in new technology, that means distributed ledger, so I know they will mention something about distributed ledger. Okay, to trade and to support property transactions and something relating to property sector. Financial year end is 31st December 2008. Very short. Okay, you can very quickly read, maybe it will not take a 1 minute also. And always time yourself, how much time are you taking to read also, because reading and writing together you should spend time. For example, this one is for 5 marks, that means 5 into 1.8, you should spend 9 minutes in section A. This 9 minutes has both reading and writing time together. Okay, you just cannot write for 9 minutes like that. You need some time, maybe 4 minutes to read and then 5 minutes to write. Okay, so that accordingly you have to decide. It depends on your speed, the way you are able to observe things, how much you are taking. So that I cannot say, okay, exactly this much only you will spend on writing, exactly this much you will spend on reading. It differs. If you're a fast reader, definitely you will spend more time on writing and less time in reading. But if you're a slow reader, then it's the other way around. Okay, so coming to apartment blocks. The company builds apartment blocks which normally takes 2 years to complete from the date of signing the contract. So this looks like a construction. You're constructing a building. Okay, and there's a contract also. That means it looks like it is a contract from customer. That means IFRS 15. Okay, performance obligation is satisfied at a point in time. It's very important. Whenever they give you IFRS 15 revenue recognition, you need to know whether whether it is satisfied at a point in time or over a period of time. Then only you can say, okay, revenue will be recognized like this. Otherwise, you cannot say. Okay, sometimes they will give you, sometimes you have to use your brain. If they don't give you, you have to know how it will be. For example, if I am selling a good to you, good, normally good is at a point in time. When the control passes to the customer, you recognize the revenue. But for services, it is over a period of time, something like this. But here they have clearly given you, so there is no doubt. You don't have to write those factors over the period of time at a point in time. Clearly they mention is at a point in time. So the title and the possession and control of the apartment block passes to the customer upon the completion of the construction. That means the day you have completed this construction, that day the control, the position, the title of the block, apartment block goes to the customer. So the price which is payable on the completion, definitely you need a transaction price. Okay, all the 5 things has to be there: the contract, the price, okay, everything. So the price which is payable on the completion of each apartment block is 9.55 million. This is the price that was determined, the transaction price, you can say. Alternatively, customers can pay 8.5 million cash on the day that the contract is signed. When the contract is signed, they can pay this much on cash. The chief accountant has calculated that this represents an appropriate borrowing rate of 6%. Okay, this is the borrowing rate. So the moment borrowing rate is there, means it is IS 23. And Calibra immediately recognizes 8.5 million as revenue. Why? Because they received 8.5 million cash. So they recognize this only as revenue if customers pay when they sign the contract. Okay, other things I don't need to read now. I can answer part A and B with that. So, so how do you recognize revenue? Now, okay, you can write a subheading revenue recognition. Subheading is very important, whether it's a 3 marks question or a 10 marks question. Definitely for a 10 marks question, you'll be having many subheadings, but for a small question, you'll be just one subheading is enough. But write your answer in different paragraphs. There should be a space. This white space that you can see, it has to be there. Very frequently it has to be used. But it does not mean that after every line you keep space and then write. For example, one line. There should not be 10 paragraphs. Okay, it does not make sense because it's just for 5 marks. So now, first of all, you have to decide whether it's correct or not. Whether this revenue recognition is correct or definitely it's incorrect. Because in your question number 2, they will always give you some incorrect treatments only that you have to correct. Okay. And if you don't know that in question number 2 they give you incorrect treatment, it's okay. But looking at it, it is incorrect. Because 8.5 million you cannot recognize it as a revenue. You have to recognize 9.55 million only when construction is completed, because that is what it was agreed on. Okay. that the only control everything will pass on to the revenue. So you have to mention that in the first few lines in the first paragraph. Okay, so control of the, when do you recognize revenue? When the control goes, when it is at a point in time, it is about the control. So control of the apartment block passes to the customer on completion, the day construction is completed, apartment block is completed. So this is the point at which revenue should be recognized. It's very important that you mention at which point revenue has to be recognized. In the first line only, first line should be that. After that only we'll talk about, according to IFRS 15, how you have to recognize. But first, it is this. So Calibra therefore is incorrect to recognize revenue on the receipt of the payment. Can you recognize revenue when you're receiving cash? No, it's incorrect. So now, from there onwards, build the second paragraph. What is it? We have to talk about the 2-year time period. Okay, there's a 2-year delay now between the payment and the transfer of the underlying asset. You have to mention this point. You are paying 2 years before 8.5, but transfer of that asset will happen after 2 years only, right? So this means according to IFRS 15, this is an advance payment, isn't it? Advance payment. You're paying, receiving early, then you are giving the asset. So advance payment contains a significant financing component. These things are there in your IFRS 15 if you forgot, by the way. You have to go back. You can check my videos on IFRS 15. It's there under SBR revision, SBR lecture, and come back and do this question if you're having a doubt. Advance payment. This contains a significant financing component. How do you deal with this issue is now the question. When it's an advance payment which contains a significant financing component. So in this case, what should you do? The revenue recognized should be the amount that customer would have paid if they had paid the cash at the day the good was transferred. This is how you recognize the revenue. In this case, it will be 9.55 million. Why? Because after 2 years, you will be paying 9.55 million only. So if you are paying anything at this amount at today, 2 years before, you can recognize it as revenue. Why? Because after 2 years also, you'll be paying the same amount only. Okay. That should not be different. You understanding? I will repeat again that the amount of revenue that you have to recognize depends on the cash that you are paying. For example, the amount of cash that you are paying today has to be the same amount of cash that you will pay once the good is transferred, apartment block is transferred to the customer, which is 9.55 million, right? Because when apartment block is passed to the customer, that day 9.55 million only you will receive from your customer. So today, if you receive that 9.55 million, yes, you can recognize it as a revenue. But here you are receiving less than 9.55 million, which is 8.5. That's why you have to correct that, right? Because over the 2-year period, you have to discuss the accounting treatment. So when you're receiving the payment now, how do you recognize it? This is under IFRS 15 only we are talking. We still didn't touch borrowing cost. For borrowing cost is a separate subheading and that is a different thing. So when you're receiving this payment, you have to recognize a liability of 8.5 million, the company. Always mention the name of the company. That company should do this, company should not do this, company should do that. Whenever you answer anything, always the company. Company should do this, company should not do that. Okay. So when you're receiving payment, you recognize it as a liability, not a revenue. How much? The amount that you have received, 8.5 million. Okay, and any interest 6% will be on that 8.5 million. It will increase your liability. That's 6% every year. That means for the 2 years. Just add 6% and see on 8.5 how much it will be. It will come up to 9.55. Maybe a little more than 9.55, but it's okay. If you add 6% on 8.5, that means it's there in the later part B, but 1.6 into 8.5, then 1.6 into 1.6 already, sorry, on this again multiply 1.6, it will add up to 9.55. That means after 2 years it will be 9.55 only. Okay, So 6% each year. And it will increase your carrying amount of the liability. Definitely, when you're adding an interest also on that liability, 6% will increase your liability. So after 2 years, this liability will have a carrying amount of this much, the amount of your revenue only. You have to write it after 2 years what will happen. It's not just the initial. Okay. So what happens when the control is finally passed? This liability, then you de-recognize the liability and recognize the revenue in the statement of profit and loss. Write the place also where you are going to recognize this revenue in the profit and loss account. So de-recognize after 2 years liability and recognize the revenue. It's 9.55, same amount. Now we are going to the that is under IFRS 15. Okay, so it's done. Now we are coming to the borrowing cost. Borrowing cost was very small, maybe 3 marks for IFRS 15 and 2 marks for borrowing cost. Definitely borrowing cost you will be having something less only to write about. So it's in two separate paragraph. You can see first paragraph they define what is borrowing cost, definition of borrowing cost. So all those things is from there from your textbook you will get it. That borrowing costs are directly attributable to the acquisition, construction, production of a qualifying asset, which form part of the cost of the asset. So for example, if you are taking a loan, okay, on any of the asset that you have acquired, or maybe the asset is under construction, okay, of a qualifying asset, then whatever the cost of that loan you add it to the asset, it will be taken as a cost of an asset. Okay, what is the meaning of qualifying asset? Those assets that takes long time to get ready for use. Like in this case, it takes 2 years for the apartment block to complete. So if you are taking any loan on that apartment block, will be added to the cost of the apartment because it's a qualifying asset. Okay. So first paragraph definition, second paragraph you're linking this to the case study. How? Apartment block take 2 years to construct. So it is a qualifying asset. First of all, to apply IS 23 on this, you first have to know whether it's a qualifying asset or not. That's why definition in the first paragraph is very important to answer the second. So qualifying, so yes, this is a qualifying asset because it takes 2 years for the construction to finish. Okay. Now, so Calibra's business model is construction. What is it? They are into the construction. So any borrowing cost, you can add it as a cost of its inventory. Should be included in the cost of its inventory. That means for those apartment blocks. Okay. So any other borrowing costs are recognized as an expense. Remember, only applicable not all the borrowing costs you can take as the cost of an asset, or in this case, cost of inventory. Only applicable. And other borrowing cost, what about the other borrowing cost? If you have some other borrowing cost, they will be recognized as an expense. This also you have to write clearly. Don't forget to mention it. Okay, so that's it for IS 23. Coming to P, journal entries. Okay, many students struggle with journal entries, but journal entry is very easy. It should be easy for you. Because why? It is an assumed knowledge. Assumed knowledge means it is from a financial reporting. You are expected to know this at SBR, even though you are not taught this in SBR. Okay, and your debit and credit, they should always balance. If it's not, then something is wrong. Okay. Okay, so now let's start. So this should be this thing. Okay, for every year you have to write what you're going to do. For both the years you have to write. So this is your total, this thing for which you are receiving 3 marks. Just okay. After that we have ethics. Okay, you have to write it like this: one side debit, one side credit. Okay, and make sure that you write the currency dollar million. First, always start with the debit and then credit. I think you know this. And then one line to write the description that what you are doing. Okay, so first when you're receiving that 8.5 million, definitely cash debit. And where are you going to credit? Not revenue, liability credit. Okay, 8.5 million, 8.5 million. Okay, in the description it's clearly mentioned records liability on the receipt of a cash on this date. Write the date also because you're writing this over 2 year period. Now comes the first and the second year, the interest. So you are going to debit your inventory with that interest. What is that interest? Simply 6% on that 8.5, which is 0.51 and 0.51. Liability, still credit because this interest will add up to your liability. It will increase your liability. Okay, so liability still you keep on crediting, but you're debiting it in inventory, the interest. According to IS 23, we told that, right? And here the description is there, that interest acquiring on the liability at this date. Okay, they have showed it also 6% on this one. Make sure that you also do it in a similar way. This is included in the cost of the inventory. Same for the second also. Now it will be higher, 0.54. It is this. Debit inventory, credit liability, same. 6% on this amount. Okay. So 8, and this amount you have, that is 0.5, right? 6% on 8.5 is 0.5. This you have to add with 8.5 and then you have to take 6% on that. Okay. Don't forget, it's not just 6% and 8.5 for both the years. No. Second year when you are taking it, it will be 6% on this added amount. This 0.51 should be added with 8.5 and then you have to take 6%. Then finally, the last year, after 2 years, whatever the liability you have incurred, 0.51 plus 0.54 with 8.5 is 9.55. You debit now. That means you are de-recognizing liability and you are recognizing revenue. Already you have explained this here in under your IFRS 15. Here, maybe I will highlight it for you. That liability is de-recognized, revenue is recognized. Already you have mentioned. Now you are just doing it, the calculation in part B, journal entry. So this should be nothing for you. You should not spend more than two minutes here. If you have understood properly and wrote your answers in part A. Okay. So the balance on the contract liability would be this much. You are just writing explanation, the three things. Okay. This is just the repetition what you did in part A. Contract liability. Okay. So this balance. Okay, this will be the balance on the contract liability. You de-recognize the liability, recognize revenue of this much when the control passes to the customer. So this is just the repetition of it. Now we are coming to the ethics. Okay, for ethics, let us read the other remaining paragraphs. But for that, you need apartment block also. Chief accountant and the Badoni company. So the chief accountant does not hold a permanent does not hold a permanent employment contract with the company. He has applied for the position on a permanent basis. So here itself you can find out some ethical issues. He does not have any employee contract, but he wants a position on a permanent basis and is to be independent in the near future. Badoni, a customer, who is Badoni? It is a customer of the company, Calibra. And he wants to take the advantage of this 8.5 million reduced price. Okay, for an apartment that was having problem with the cash flow. The chief accountant therefore allowed the customer to pay this much and delay the payment until 1 month after the contract was signed. So in return, definitely there would be something that the chief accountant also will receive in return. That's why he is willing to do this for the customer, right? First of all, he allowed that he can pay the reduced price and also delay payment until 1 month after the contract was signed. Okay. So in return, the customer, Bodoni, they have agreed to provide a good employment reference for the chief accountant. And the chief accountant was afraid that he might lose this one, Bodoni, as a customer and referee if he did not agree to delay in the payment. So you can understand ethical issue very well. It's very clearly evident from here, right? Now, distributed ledger technology. Calibra has recently used this one, distributed ledger technology or blockchain, to sell shares in a property to investors. This digitized transactions are only visible to the authorized parties. Chief accountant publicly supports this technology and is to manage the new system. However, he has some private concerns over the reliability of the due diligence that is carried out on the sale of the property shares and the violation of the local regulation. Okay. The directors wants to increase the number of transactions on a distributed ledger by offering digital shares in the whole of the entity's property portfolio. But the chief accountant has very basic knowledge of this distributed ledger. But if you see this with a few line above, that he first of all he has basic knowledge, okay, but still he supports this technology and he is managing this new system. It looks a little bit odd, right? That he has basic knowledge. How is he managing the new system if he does not have so much of knowledge? He has assured the directors, even though he has basic knowledge, that he can facilitate this move. So the project has been approved by the board. Despite the chief accountant's private reservation, the board still went on. And the chief accountant has only recently qualified as an accountant. That means he's very young, he's inexperienced, and still he wishes to be employed on a permanent basis. So now ethical. Ethics is a very big topic, general, wide topic, broad. But you have to write specific points to get marks. You cannot write, okay, don't write the five ethical code of ethics, confidentiality, objectivity, and all those things. Okay. So before that, let us go through the tutorial note. Okay. But in this scenario, this is a very unusual scenario. Why? Because you may not heard about this distributed ledger before. Maybe you did, but it was not asked before. Okay. But just because distributed ledger is there does not mean that you cannot answer this question, right? You only need your ACCA ethical code to answer this question. So don't get so tense, so worried, so panicked because you see the word distributed ledger. Oh, I don't know about distributed ledger. How am I going to answer this question? You don't need the knowledge of distributed ledger here to answer this question. Okay, and if you see the model answer, that means this is ACCA's model answer that they have given you. Okay, if you see here, they write it in two paragraphs. They just wrote it in two paragraphs. Okay, it looks too much of information and only two paragraphs. You try to avoid this. Okay, when you are answering, don't do this. Try to write it in different paragraph. Maybe 5 or 6 paragraph is good enough. So write it accordingly into 5 or 6 paragraphs. Even the ACCA says that this is compromise of two large paragraphs, but they recommend you to keep the points separate and plenty of white space. That means many different paragraphs, so that it becomes easier for the markers also to read your answer. Okay, always try to make sure that keep your answer very easy for someone to understand and read. This looks very I mean, if I was to mark this answer, I will be having a difficulty in marking this, right? Only two paragraphs and so much in one paragraph, so many lines. Keep 5 to 6 lines only per paragraph. Okay, so now let's start. Ethical question, you are free to start in any way. Okay, you can start in any order, any issue. You can start with any issue. There may be 3 4 issues, but in this case, what I would suggest, start with the distributed ledger part. Okay, you have two issues here. One is distributed ledger, the other one is with the customer, the botany company, the customer, what they did, revenue recognition relating to the apartment block. So you can answer this too and keep those in two separate paragraphs. So distributed ledger, you can start with this or you can start with that, but distributed ledger is better to start with that first because we have more points to write on that. You understanding? So in this case, number one issue is they do not have an understanding. They should have claimed, right? Because the requirement asked you, chief accountant should have acted. You have to discuss the way. 10 marks. How are you going to divide this 10 marks? Maybe you can write 6 to 7 points, right? So first one, definitely we'll see the marking scheme, how the points we are getting, we'll understand. But in this case, they should have not claimed to have an understanding of distributed ledger, right? If they only have a basic knowledge. So this is like 1 mark. You are telling them what they should do, how they should have acted. They should have told them that he has basic knowledge. But he claims that he have an understanding of distributed ledger, right? And he should. So how do you know that you are telling some actions? You are telling how he should add. The word that he should. From here you will understand. Count how many times you are writing he should do this, he should do this. So you will get that many marks. If you are writing he should 10 times, that means you are getting the 10 points. But provided the points are valid and the points are different from each other. It's not the same point you are giving in different words. So first one is about basic knowledge. Second is he should have seen evidences of whether the technology can be scaled up. to the requirements of the director before promising that he can facilitate the moves, or before he can promise that yes, he can that they should go ahead with this. He should first see whether this technology can be scaled up to the requirements of the directors or not. He should have some evidences of it. So this is the second point. Second mark you will get from here. And these 2 points are different. First is related to basic knowledge. Second is about the scalability of the technology. Third, he must convince himself that the reliability of the due diligence on the sale of property shares and the local regulations are complied with, because he was concerned whether local regulations are complied with or not, whether whether there's a reliability on the due diligence or not. He should first convince himself that they are complied with. So that is the third. Due diligence and local regulations. Third point. 3 marks you will get from here only. Okay. Nothing was mentioned about ethics. It is just what he should do, he should do, he should do. Okay. Now, so this you can write in one paragraph only, the first 3 points, and we'll read more. So in order to maintain integrity and professional account, say maintain integrity. What are the 5 code of ethics? Integrity, confidentiality, objectivity, professional due care, professional behavior and due care, and professional competence. Right? So out of this 5, you have to decide which one is being breached, which one has a higher chances of getting breached. Is it professional behavior, due care, objectivity? In this case, it is integrity, because he's not honest, he's hiding things, he's concealing, he's not saying he has a basic knowledge. Okay, so in order to maintain integrity, because here this question is not about ethical issues, what the accountant should do. So in order to maintain, how can you maintain integrity? You have to tell that they should do this. Professional accountant must be honest about whether they are comfortable with their knowledge of managing this project like this or not, so that integrity is maintained. Okay, this is point number 4. So you're linking this with ethical code of ethics, integrity, with the action that they should do this. They should be honest that they are comfortable in managing projects like this or not, looking at their basic knowledge. Next, chief accountant should not manage the project if he has doubt. Okay, this is the explanation of this one only, integrity. They should not manage the project if they have any doubt regarding their knowledge. Why? Because when the project progresses ahead, they will have issues. They will have issues if they don't have knowledge and they're going ahead with the project. So this is just an explanation of that. It's built up. So it's not a separate point. Now, there may be a need to engage specialized consultancy. Okay, this is point number 5. There need to be engaged. Sorry, there may be a need to engage specialist consultancy input from distributed ledger experts. So distributed ledger expert is something new technology, right? Always whenever new technology is coming, you always need some consultant, some expert on that field when you're new to this thing. So in this case also, you can engage, or you may need for such a person, specialist. So this is point number 5. Okay. Similarly, the chief accountant should behave in a professional manner and determine whether the data on the distributed ledger break any confidentiality principles or not. Confidentiality is something new. Normally, confidentiality issue does not come in your ethics. It is always objectivity or integrity, or sometimes professional behavior, competence and due care. In this case, confidentiality is breached, has a higher chance of breach. Why? Because it is something on technology now. It has a chance of getting hacked. Hence, all the confidential information might be leaked. So that's why they have to see, who has to see this? Chief accountant. They have to see whether any data on that distributed ledger whether it breaks any confidentiality principles or not. Now again you are linking this with ethics. Okay, first it was integrity, now it is confidential principles. So this is maybe point number 6. So he will need to consider, okay, the fact that local regulations may be violated. Yes, this is the explanation of this confidentiality principles. Okay, the others are not. It's not that each point is different points only. He will need to consider the fact that the local regulations may be violated. Yes, there are chances that this can be violated. He has to consider that also, and the repercussions also of that. That means again the confidential issues come there. So the technology allows resale of the shares in the property, and given the chief accountant's bodies over due diligence, illegal transfer of title ownership could be costly and time consuming to resolve. Okay. If there are any illegal transfer that is happening or there are issues over due diligence comes true, then it can be very costly and it is time consuming to resolve also such issues. Okay. So this is just the explanation of confidentiality issues. Okay. Building upon that. You might not write so much. It's okay. The chief accountant must also see, you're always saying he should, chief accountant should, chief accountant should. Okay, so always you have to write this. Keep your answer consistent for every point. So chief accountant must also exercise independence of mind. Point number 7. He should be independent in his mind. When he's taking decision, he should be independent. He should not bow to the political pressure from the board, even though it may be a high profile project for the company. Yes, investing in technology is a very high profile project for this company, the distributed ledger, but still he should be independent in his decision. So he should inform the board of his reservations based upon his opinion and technical knowledge. Whatever the knowledge he has, he should inform this to the board. This is also the build up of this point only, independence of mind. Okay. Now, so point number 8, 9, 10 you will get from the second paragraph. Now, it's not every time they are giving actions only. Sometimes they are giving what could be the ethical issues also. So one of the main concern, what could be the main concern? Now you are giving a background. Try to give background also like this, like concerns of a particular person who is being unethical. Okay, that also giving your answer. This will give you better marks, and also you might get the 2 professional marks. Okay, because we exactly don't know, I cannot pinpoint and tell you, okay, this is where you are going to get your the 2 professional marks. Examine also never says you like that. Okay, but try to give up this. So the main concern of accounting profession is what? What is he concerned of? What is his fear? This you have to write in your answer. It is of losing objectivity in their judgment. That means accountants always fear that what if I am not objective in my decision, in my judgment? Why? Because I'm getting pressure from the client, it could be from the employer, it could be from other stakeholders. Even though this is clearly not mentioned, or even if they don't mention, you have to say this. Because in this case, he does not seem independent. Okay? So if this happens, what happens? Your professional identity, it's in loss, right? If you're not able to take an independent decision. So young accountants, he's being young because he's newly employed. He's not being employed, but he does not have a permanent employment contract, but he's young, right? He just qualified. So for young accountant, at the beginning of their career, when someone is young, so here you will get some professional marks. The 2 professional marks you might get here, because this is something not ethics. This is not something that you are taking from the case study also. Something you from yourself you are giving, from your idea, your insight to this, that you have identified that he's young. Did anywhere they told he's young? No. You are taking it how? Because they told he just qualified. So from that statement you can say that he's a young accountant and probably he's at the beginning of his career. Okay. So because of this points will have an impact on your answer. So this could be considered as a vulnerable group. Okay, why? Because this is the group who are more easily influenced. When someone is old and experienced, do you think anyone can influence them? No. They know what they're talking about. They know that they can exercise independence. But this group, they easily get influenced. There are two reasons for that. One is lack of experience, because they always feel that whatever their colleagues or the board is saying is better, because they might be having more experience. I don't have. Everyone knows that they don't have experience. Inside they know, even if they don't say. So this guy also, he knows that he does not have, he only has basic knowledge. So he can easily get influenced by the board because lack of experience and the pressure also. Senior colleagues will always try to put pressure on you if you are new. So because of two reasons, you easily get influenced. You cannot practice that independence of mind. Okay. So accountant has already just qualified. You see, now you are linking this to the case study. How you are saying that is your accountant? Because he just qualified. So looking at this, he's inexperienced for this position of chief accountant. Another issue. These are the points that if you bring out, you will get the 2 professional marks. Okay. So in this case, he has created a self-interest thread. You will get marks like this from here also. You have to mention the type of, remember the 5 types of thread? Self-interest, self-review, familiarity, advocacy, and intimidation thread. Out of this, which this is a self-interest thread. Why? Because he has a personal interest in allowing the Bodoni company to pay the reduced 1 month after the contract for the purchase of the apartment block. Now you are linking to that apartment block. So from here, he is having a self-interest thread. He also has an interest there. Why? Because if he reduces the price for the customer will give them better reference in the future for the employment opportunities. Right? As he wishes a good reference from the client when applies for the permanent position. So that is point number, you can say 8. And the pressure of applying for this position has inappropriately influenced his professional judgment, because now he has a pressure that he has to apply for this position. What position? Permanent position. Okay. He has inappropriately influenced this. Because of this, there is a pressure on him. He has personally pressurized himself. Okay. So because of that, he cannot make a professional judgment also. It is influenced, inappropriately influenced, not in a good way, in a bad way. He cannot be objective. He cannot use his professional judgment. He cannot say, no, I'm not going to accept that payment from the customer. He cannot say. He cannot he cannot take that professional stand for himself. Why? Because he have to apply for the position, permanent position. He has that pressure on also. So there's a threat to the objectivity. So because of this, there's a threat to the objectivity also. Chief accountant's objectivity. He will not be objective in his decision. And this objectivity issue comes from threat comes from the self-interest thread only. So from here they will get some 9 points maybe, and 10 points maybe somewhere in between. Okay, which I maybe didn't mark. So there's a thread to objectivity because of the self-interest thread, that he has a fear of losing him as a customer. Okay, because if he loses him as a customer, as a referee, accountant's chance of securing the permanent position also will get affected. You understanding? So now that's it. We'll see the marking scheme and the examiner's comment. Okay, marking scheme, if you see, is very less: 3 for revenue, 2 for borrowing cost. Journal entries is 3 marks. Discussion is 10 and professional marks is 2. See, professional marks, they will never tell you which one. Now examiner's comment. If you see A, okay, most of the candidates, they told it's a recognition over a period of time, because looking at the 2 year because construction first of all and is over a 2 year period. So looking at that, they incorrectly told it's over a period of time. No, clearly they mentioned is at a point in time. Okay, and this journal entry is repeated in part A and part B, wasting time. That's why I read all requirements to avoid this mistake. Part B, most of the time part B was clear, okay, for most of the students. That means the journal entries. But some of them, they neglected to show the derecognition of liability and recognition of revenue instead. Okay, and part C, this is generally, it was good, the ethics. Ethical issues clearly students were able to identify and also how to resolve them. But some, they just did a list of ethical responsibilities. They just gave some list that these are the ethical responsibilities that they should do, which does not even meet the requirements that was asked. So in this type of answers will only get very few marks. Okay, you have to apply this to the two scenarios, the Bodoni and the distributed ledger. And some, what they did, too much of information from the question only they repeated in the answer. Okay, but overall it's a good, it's pleasing that you were able to identify the thread, the self-interest thread and objectivity, and also appropriate actions were there. Okay, so this was overall, it was good. So that's it for this, and see you in the next question, which is question number 20.